We have two guests who are joining us now in the studio. We want to have a conversation about youth and especially thinking about children and well-being. It's talking about whole child wellness. Joining us in the studio is Moses Oluchiri Amonje. He is a founder and executive director of an organization called Wellness for Greatness Kenya. And Duncan Van Dusen, who's a founder and CEO of Catch Global Foundation. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on the show. We'll be, of course, seeking to understand what exactly your two organizations do and why you are focusing a lot on children and fitness and what that fitness then does, right? I want to start with you, Moses. Wellness for Greatness Kenya. What is it and what's it all about?
Wellness for Greatness Kenya, first, thank you for welcoming to this show and to share knowledge about the importance of physical activity when it comes to promoting health. So Wellness for Greatness Kenya is a non-governmental organization, and our programs are designed to promote and encourage physical activity and also to encourage the consumption of healthy diets. One of the problems that as an organization that we realized before starting the organization, me and my colleagues, is that many organizations, including government, focus on treatment of non-communicable diseases. But as an organization, we're focusing on prevention and management of non-communicable diseases through promoting physical activity and the consumption of healthy diets. And the best way to inculcate healthy lifestyles is from a tender age, and that's why our programs are normally introduced through schools or through young people. Yeah.
Right. How about Catch Global Foundation, Duncan?
Well, Catch Global Foundation is a provider of wellness programs to schools all over the world. So we have users of our programs in over 30 countries now. And in total, we reach 15,000 schools and 3 million kids per year. Catch is, I think, distinguished by a couple things. One is Catch is evidence-based. So Catch was started through a United States National Institutes of Health grant 35 years ago. I was not involved at the time. I was still in high school. And it has been over 35 years continuously researched and improved and adapted to, different conditions. Even within the United States, we have many, many different kinds of communities, many, many different kinds of conditions. Urban, rural, high income, low income, and many indigenous communities, many different kinds of racial profiles. So we've been able to develop a program that has a very strong scientific structure in terms of what it does, yet it also has a lot of flexibility for communities. So for us, working internationally, we use a lot of the same principles in terms of community empowerment than we use, even within the United States. Also, an important thing I think your listeners will be interested in about Catch is that Catch really exists to empower teachers and empower schools. We do not teach the children. We help provide curriculum, training, and support so that teachers and schools can do what they do best, which is to teach the kids. And it also gives us a lot of leverage because we're a 27-person organization. If we were trying to reach 3 million children directly, that would be pretty darn near impossible. We certainly wouldn't be able to do it well. But instead, we reach the 15,000 schools, and they have, hundreds of thousands of teachers, and those hundreds of thousands of teachers together reach the 3 million children. And so that's our model.
Fantastic. Why? Or, I guess it's then for both of you, if we look at the progression of education, and if you want to use Kenya as an example, physical activity is all bundled under PE as a course, right?
Yes.
Part of a unit that you take. But usually it's half an hour in the field to whatever it is that you want to do. And it's not really focusing on, physical activity. So where does all of this come in? Are we talking about bringing it back? Are we talking about looking at the importance of it? Or are we talking about then enhancing what already exists and making sure that the physical activity component is then part of this unit, as it were?
To respond to that is that there's a gap when it comes to promoting physical activity, especially in schools. In the past, physical activity used to be used as a form of punishment. For example, when a kid does something wrong or is dozing in class, the teacher will tell you, go and run. So when when other kids see this kid or this learner running outside the class, they'll understand that this kid is being punished. So there is that negative perception when it comes to physical activity. So as an organization, we've realized that there's a gap when it comes to teachers and promoting physical activity in school. It will either not happen, or if it happens, it's not being done well. And that's why we feel that teachers need skills transfer in terms of empowering them with knowledge and information on how to make PE and physical activity interesting. So we need to start by encouraging teachers, and also for teachers to understand the importance of physical activity, especially when it comes to health promotion, because kids go for PE, teachers go for PE, but they do not understand the relationship between physical activity and health, and especially when it comes to prevention of non-communicable diseases. And that's the gap that we are coming to fill in as an organization.
When you say it's a gap, Moses, what exactly do you mean? Are you saying that the teachers who come out of teacher training schools and universities do not understand the importance of PE?
I said that they need refresher courses, and they need to be given more skills, because when teachers leave, for example, those who left teacher training college maybe 10 years ago, and we need to improve in terms of what kind of activities are we giving children nowadays. For example, even if you look at, let me give an example, like traditional churches, when you used to go to Sunday school, you used to sing like old songs, like for example, people used to sing Moto Umewaka Leo. So if you take your kid to such like a church where people sing traditional songs, your kid will not be interested. So it means that we need to make PE very interesting, fun, and that's why Catch is coming in to make sure that PE is enjoyable when it comes to young people.
Give an example of something that's a physical activity or a PE that's outdated. What is it?
Like
doing somersaults on tires,
like just running. It's time for PE. Go to the field, start running. It's outdated.
Why is it outdated that it doesn't work?
It works, but it needs to be more enjoyable. It needs to be more fun. We need more ideas. We need more activities. We can't be doing one thing all the time.
I actually want to understand how running can be fun,
and that's why we need to make it interesting.
Let me just, you're asking a lot of great how questions, but let me just take a step back and talk about the why for a moment, because there are a lot of, I think, obvious benefits to physical activity, right? It can help us, helps our bodies, right? It can help us lose weight. It can help us gain strength, cardiovascular strength, avoid heart disease. So I think a lot of people know about these benefits. However, there are also a number of benefits that are not so obvious. One of them is better physical activity leads to better academic performance in schools.
Brain function.
Yes. There's a lot of evidence, an ever-growing amount of evidence that shows that especially when you improve your aerobic capacity, okay? When you improve your aerobic capacity, your brain, which runs on oxygen, is getting more oxygen. You have better academic behaviors. You have better memory and concentration. You have better standardized test scores, right? You have better graduation rates. You also have better secondary behaviors like better attendance, better discipline. So all of these things contribute to a better environment for learning. This is why we need physical activity in schools. And this is why schools have it. It's not because, necessarily the kids will be healthier 30 years from now. It's because they'll perform better right now. 30 minutes from now, we can get up in the morning and you work out and you feel great. And we all know that we can perform better and learn better. So why don't we do this for the children? A second benefit of physical activity is for mental health, right? There's also an increasing amount of research that's showing that physical activity is better than any pill for depression and anxiety. Child and teen mental health is a worldwide concern now. So this is another reason physical activity should be on the table. And the third thing, and this is part of our mission as a foundation, is physical activity is a great part of health equity and social equity, including women and girl empowerment. Okay, but all those things only work if the physical activity program is vigorous and it is inclusive. Okay, that is how we get the benefits. So when we talk about, okay, what's wrong? What's the gap? We look at really two things. Number one, when we have physical activity time, are children actually being active, right? Or are they standing in a field stretching? Or are they sitting down and, talking and doing their nails or whatever? Okay, so we have to look at whether there's a sufficient amount of vigorousness, and this is a major metric. I don't know if we want to talk about kind of how we measure our results and all that today, but I'll preview it by saying that's one of them, right? How vigorous is the physical? If we're going to have an hour math class, we want to make sure we're learning math.
Yeah.
If we're going to have an hour physical activity class, we want to make sure we're doing vigorous activity. And the second thing is it must be inclusive. So again, when we talk about what are the gaps, how is it outdated, we have to look at not, are we producing one great runner? That's athletics, is producing a small number of great performers. Physical education and physical activity is providing something for everyone. Girls, boys, people from indigenous races, people who are disabled. Everyone needs that dose of physical activity. So we really work very carefully with the schools to make sure we're improving the level of vigorousness and we're improving the amount of inclusion. And when you do that, then you can start to see those benefits across the whole community.
Okay.
I don't know, Duncan is saying with regards to even learners living with disabilities, when it comes to physical activity or rather PE time, in most cases you'll see that they might be sidelined because they might not be able to compete effectively with learners who do not have other disabilities.
Okay.
And that's why it's very important to also incorporate them. If you look at one traditional method of PE, one, for example, like elimination, where it's time for PE, but when you're eliminated, you'll stay out and watch other people playing for the rest of the time, which is something that as an organization and as a program we do not encourage. For example, when it comes to playing football, you can have the 12 players, maybe player one might not even touch the ball the whole maybe 30 minutes.
Wait,
but why can't
are
we?
12 players in the field, or are there 11?
My team has 12.
There you go.
So what if we have like 3 players or 3 by 3?
Yeah.
It means all of them will touch the ball
Sure.
for the rest of the 30 minutes. And that's what you're saying. Everybody should be involved. Every learner should be involved, and every learner should participate in physical activity and in a fun way.
Okay. So what's the case then for having a particular individual then who teaches this? I remember in the school that I went to, our PE teacher was our PE teacher, did not teach anything else. It was our coach who taught certain sports, so that if you were involved in varsity sports, then you took part in that, right? But this PE teacher, whether it was for elementary school or middle school or high school, taught just that. What's the case then to be made for not having your math teacher when they're free then now overseeing physical activity? Is there a case then to be made for one person handling that per class or something?
Yes. There's definitely a case to be made for it, and it's important to understand the difference between physical education and physical activity. Okay, so physical education involves learning skills. So the younger children will learn fundamental building block skills like throwing, catching, kicking, striking, etc. And then as we get older, we put those skills together into sports and activities. Okay, that's the physical education part. The physical activity part is more, if you will, movement. Making sure that you're aerobically productive. That can be games, just simple games. It can be running or fire brigade or throwing balls and stuff like that. So one difference is if you have a physical educator, they will know more about the technique for teaching, okay, here's what you need to change about your body to throw more effectively. Yeah. Whereas a math teacher doesn't have the background, right, and they may not be able to do the education part of physical education. However, here's what we've learned. In the United States, we have only about 75% of schools that have a physical educator, trained physical educator. Many states, including our largest state of California, there are no certified physical educators. Okay, so and similarly, we're finding in Kenya, we find in all the countries we go to, it is very, very common that even though there are benefits to having a physical educator, it's just not realistic. It's just not feasible. Especially in maybe rural areas or lower income communities, many schools are going to rely on regular classroom teachers, to do the physical activity. So this is a very important reason why catch works the way it does. Anybody, any teacher can learn to do catch, can learn to make sure, at least on the physical activity side, that kids are getting enough conditioning to get all the benefits that we've talked about. And so when we do our program, and we're doing actually our first teacher pilot training tomorrow morning, And there will be a mixture of physical educators and regular classroom teachers. And they will all be able to take that. And we have, actually, in my book that I gave you, you'll see there's a graph in there that shows the baseline for regular classroom teachers is lower. That's for sure. However, after our training, they're actually quite close. Regular educators and physical educators are quite close in their ability to have a classroom that is vigorous and inclusive. So those things can be learned. So I think the big issue is not really whether you've been to school for PE or not. The big issue is whether you get that capacity building and you get that training so that you've got those techniques, so that you have a variety of activity, and so that you know how to make it fun.
And also, in Kenya, you need to know that every teacher is a PE teacher. I'm not speaking for government, but that is what is there. Every teacher who goes through Teacher Service Commission is trained on PE, and that's why every classroom teacher is supposed to be a PE teacher. But that's it works mostly in public schools. But when it comes to private schools, it can be either that, or some private schools will employ PE coaches because they want to, as from what you're saying, they want different ways of making sure that learners understand and enjoy physical activity.
So that we can understand, you say teachers are trained in PE at the time when they're being trained. So what is this that your organizations add to what they already know? Break it down for us. What is this thing that they are taught that they previously were not taught, so that what you're then saying makes more sense and it achieves the results that you're saying? Because what is implied is that what they're taught doesn't quite achieve what it's intended to achieve.
Okay, we are not saying that what they're taught is not a really...
No, I am saying it.
Well, I would go back. I would go back to these 2 points about vigorousness and inclusion. Now, those are the 2 areas where we really see the gaps. Many teachers, they might view physical education more as sports. Okay, they may be coaches, right? So they're thinking about, how do we win games? How do we find and develop the best athletes? So it's a mindset. So they may be very skilled in coaching soccer, let's say, but they're not as skilled in making sure that all kids, whether they're athletic or not, right, are getting a vigorous time, and that they're being included. But we're focusing a little on the deficits, and I want to add a couple of assets that I see just when I compare different places that we work. So Kenya has a couple of great assets. For one, you have a giant population of youth, right? There's about 20 million school-age children in Kenya. So it's a great opportunity to influence this huge number of kids. A second asset that you have is that the government has done their part to put PE on the table figuratively and put it on the schedule literally. So it is mandatory for all schools to have a physical activity period. And whether it's being used or not is the second part, but we have to have it first, right? And so that's a real positive. And I will tell you, certainly, in the United States and in many other countries that we work in, that's not the case at all. It is not true around the world that schools are required to have physical activity, okay? So it's great in Kenya that you have that time. You have that time. And then the third thing I'll say, and Moses can expand on this, is as we were doing our initial conversations and feasibility for whether Catch would be of interest to Kenya, we talked to a lot of teachers, and what teachers consistently said is they believe that children should have physical activity. Okay, they believe that it belongs in schools. They believe that historically, sometimes that time was used for catching up on other subjects, right? Or it was, you were only getting it if you were being punished or whatever. But they believe that all children deserve it. So I think that you have...
Can I interject and ask why? As they said this to you, did they say the reasons why they felt it was important?
In terms of not maybe choosing other subjects not PE, it's for academic performance. Teachers would prefer, or even parents would actually make sure that their kids perform well in school, but not engage in physical activity or even sports. You'll get a parent who knows his son or daughter is in football, will prefer the son to be in the house, maybe reading, but not outside playing. So it starts from home, where the parents want kids to perform well in school. And that's the difference that the competence-based curriculum is bringing, whereby exams or school is not supposed to be exam based. So it has to be competency based. And
so teachers are saying they prefer for physical activity to be present in schools, but why?
I think that's a really interesting question, and the feeling that I got was that there were a lot of, if you will, emotional reasons. I think that a lot of the people I talked to said that they believe that it's right. They believe it's fair. They believe it's healthy. So they weren't citing scientific studies or rattling off data. Actually, to be frank, I think that they may have even underappreciated the value of physical activity to the learning process. They were just thinking, this is right. This is the right thing to do. And it's kind of that phrase used at the top of the hour, whole child. That this is part of what children deserve. And this is, having this basic belief. This is so important, okay? Because we can teach the how. We can teach, this is, introduce a larger variety. Here's how you make it more vigorous. Here's how you make it more inclusive. We can teach that. But we can't teach that basic belief that it's, that it's good for children. You can present all the scientific arguments you want, but if people don't believe that activity is good and that activity belongs in schools, it's very, very hard to overcome that. So again, I think it's good to consider, the assets that, your system has in that regard. And I would add, in addition to the time on the schedule, there's also the fact that physical activity is built into the new CBCs.
So you rolling out a Catch PE in some 20 Kenyan schools. What exactly is that? What schools, where are they, and what will you be doing?
Yeah, great. Let me just make a couple background points about how we generally structure these projects, and then Moses will tell you the details of this one. So, Catch, as I mentioned, we're a global foundation. We have a program that's been scientifically developed over 35 years. And we've seen it work in many, many places. But it doesn't work exactly the same way. So when we start working in a new area, we have a couple of principles that we use. The first principle is local empowerment. Okay, so first of all, we never go anywhere without being invited. As Moses will tell you, I didn't call him; he called me, so to speak. So we want to make sure that the community wants this information and materials. Okay, so that's the first thing, is local empowerment. And so everything that happens in Kenya happens through Wellness for Greatness. Okay, this is the Kenya head of Catch. This is our Catch Kenya partner. Okay, and that of course extends to, as we start working in schools, as you'll hear, the 20 schools that we're piloting are all in Nairobi County. As we hopefully someday roll out to other areas of the country, we will empower those communities to do things in the way and adapt things to the way that they do it. The second principle that's very, very important is we're collaborative. So even, Moses, Wellness for Greatness, does not try to act alone. Right? Acting in concert with other partners, both governmental and non-governmental, philanthropists, et cetera. Again, Moses will tell you about the detail, but it's very, very important to understand the power of that coalition. Okay? And then the third principle is there has to be some adaptation of the materials, right? So we have a great library of physical activities, right, that we've developed, over the years. When we come to work in a new place, we try to understand the basic conditions that we're dealing with. How much space, how much equipment, what kinds of activities are, culturally appropriate, right? And so we'll curate the activity library for a certain place. And then we start working with our local partners. We look at, what are the national teaching standards, in this case, the CBC, and do, several rounds of review to make sure that the language is right and the activities are right and all that. So there's a whole process of adaptation. So those are the three principles that underlie every one of our projects: local empowerment, collaboration with community coalitions, and, adaptation of materials.
Yeah, so with regards to the schools that we're currently working with, is that, in Kenya we have public and private schools. At the moment, we are piloting in 20 private schools. We are working with the Kenya Private School Association, and they've really supported the program, and they're really keen on us rolling out the program in the schools. So when it comes to private school, again, it has to go through government and through Teacher Service Commission. when it comes to catch, as Duncan has said, we train teachers. So for public schools, we have to train teachers through the Teacher Service Commission, which is a process that's ongoing. And we currently have an MOU with the Ministry of Education through the KICD, Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. So when it comes to private schools, we're working with the teachers who are paid by the private school owners. So they've accepted for us to work with them at the moment, and we're piloting it in 20 schools. And we have 4 teachers per school, and it will be approximately 120 teachers. So we've already done a test to see how PE is working now before catch, and after catch, after 2 or 3 months, we'll again go back to the schools to see how catch is being implemented and if it's making a difference. Yeah.
Let me add on to just a little bit more detail on the test. So we use a system which is called SOFIT, and that stands for System for Observation of Fitness Instruction Time. And again, we've used this all over the world. What SOFIT does is it is a measure which combines these 2 points that I made earlier. How vigorous is the activity, and how inclusive is the activity? Okay, so you're looking at all the children in the classroom at random intervals. Are you sitting, standing, walking, or running? Okay, and that's measuring the activity. So as Moses said, before we conduct any training, before we're doing this, we do a baseline, right? So we've completed that baseline. And after we usually wait about a month after the training, because we want to make sure if you go the next day after training, everyone remembers and they're doing what you taught them, right? You have to wait and see, is this sticking? Is it sustainable? So we go back in about a month and we do the test again. And by August or so, by the next school break, we hope to have some results. So be happy to come back on your program and share the results of this test. But it's usually quite revealing to see the difference that can be made. We've talked a couple of times about the gaps, right? This is a great way of measuring how big is the gap, and are we able to help close it?
When you said that you now roll it out in those schools, 4 teachers per school and all, is there any minimum requirement for a school? Like the size of the playground, the number of hours or minutes that a PE lesson is going to last, or anything?
The beautiful thing with the competency-based curriculum is that it has made PE to be compulsory, and in schools, PE is actually on a daily basis. So long as you're a school in Kenya and you're undertaking the competence-based curriculum, or even if it is an international school, you can take up catch. And the fact that you see, it's also about awareness creation. We create awareness, whether it is happening. We create awareness on the importance, and then we come to your school and we tell you more about the program and how it can be implemented. The good thing also about catch is that it can still work in a class environment. It doesn't have to be like you don't need a field or an open space to do catch. Even in the classroom environment, it can still work very well.
So what exactly do you then do? Give us an example of 1 week working in one of the schools. What is it that you will be teaching the teachers that adds, like you said, it's empowering the community, it's empowering the teachers. What exactly will you be teaching them?
Well, it's important to clarify. So we don't go into the schools and teach the kids. What we're really doing is training the teachers in a system.
Okay.
Right? So let me go back just one point earlier to your question about requirements for a school, because there is another key requirement, and that is the school director must sign off. Okay, this is not just voluntary for teachers to come. Okay, we want to make sure that we have the administrative support from the head teacher or school director. Okay.
At what point do they sign off?
Well, it's usually a matter of weeks before the training.
So they sign off before the training?
They sign off before the training, absolutely.
But how are they signing off before the training when they have not known the impact of the training?
Well, that's a great question. And this is why we're very, very disciplined about doing the pilot. So it's always hard to recruit the first few schools, right? Amazingly, though, when we everything came together to do the training this time around, we were able to recruit the schools quite quickly, and I think that's mostly because of the reputation of the program, the results we've been able to get in other countries, and the fact that we're aligned with the CBC. So they know that this program has been reviewed, right? And they know that it is essentially approved, right, for use in the country. So you're right. The first few directors don't have a lot of evidence to work on, and these are our thought leaders. Okay, and this is also a very important thing when we think about how do we bring this program to a population. Okay, well, it's like if you're selling an iPhone. When the iPhone first came out, you just can't just sell it to the masses on the first day. The very beginning, right? It was just for, the geeks and the techies, and, this was a weird thing, and they didn't know it was going to work or not, right? And it didn't work perfectly, and you have to go through, that's why we're on iPhone 1, iPhone 2, and now we're up to iPhone 14, right? Because they keep improving it. And as you move from the thought leaders to the larger population, that's where you have to have more evidence, right? So the thought leaders, you're working with them to trial it. Is it going to work? And then you get proof points, and then you can take it to a larger group. So that's why it's very important for us to find people who are willing, right, to do it without knowing for sure, is it going to work in Kenya yet? Is it going to work in my school? They don't know yet. We're going to do the training, and then we're going to observe again, and we're going to see, and that's why we keep it small, and then we go to the next group and be able to show them.
Sure.
Yep, and just what I don't know what Duncan is saying is that the reason why we want the leadership of the school to take up to sign up is because we want the project to be implemented. Because we do not want to for the school to start a project where it will die along the way. We believe that when the school leadership takes up the project, it will be done. And that's why, apart from the training, we are encouraging something. We're coming up with an advisory group for schools known as like wellness councils or a health committee in that school, so that the wellness committee will have the teachers, the learners, the school leadership, and also the parents to be a part of it, so that anything they will need in terms of implementing the catch program in the school can be provided. When there's a gap, when there's a need, when the learners need something, they can communicate through the advisory group, and the members of the group who are the leadership of the school can take it up and make sure that it is done in that school. Right. We are also coming up with the teachers that we're training will be the catch champions or the wellness champions or the physical activity champions in the school. They're the champions. They want to make sure that it happens. We want to make sure that we have learners who are the ambassadors of the catch program in the school, so they can talk about it, they can preach about it, and that we can make it happen in the schools. And then we have sustainability when we have everybody in the school community involved in it.
Okay. I still haven't gotten the answer.
Yeah.
What is the catch program?
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So, if you're going to learn to cook, right? Someone can't just give you a recipe book, right? You don't just go and say, we're going to do recipe number 1 and then we're going to do recipe number 2. If you go to cooking school, you learn techniques, right? How to properly chop, how to control heat on the fire, how to make a sauce, etc. And so catch is teaching techniques for physical activity. So when we train educators, all these educators are already doing something, right? So the first thing is, we don't try to erase everything that you do and everything that you know. We try to reflect on it and see, okay, here's the philosophical system. We want to use physical activity time to be enjoyable. We want it to be vigorous. We want it to be inclusive. So reflect on the activities that you do, which ones are meeting those tests for all learners and which ones aren't. And we'll teach them new activities. So over the course of it's a 6-hour training for teachers, okay? So over the course of the 6-hour training, we don't just sit down the whole time. Far from it. Actually, it's quite an active training. We tell all the teachers, bring your running shoes and bring your stretch
Come in
pants.
your PE gear.
Bring your PE gear. They're dressed more like Moses than like me. Right? And so we're giving them a little bit of theory, and then we're doing some practice. And so during the course of the day, they'll learn 12 to 15 new activities as examples of ones that are inclusive, vigorous, and fun, right? And so we're giving them some new examples that can increase their repertoire. And we reflect on, okay, when you conduct your class, what classroom management techniques are you going to use? Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, it's time for physical activity. Everybody come in and sit down. Sit down. Everybody sit down, sit down, sit down. And I'm going to explain what we're going to do today. Okay? Does that sound like fun for children? No, it doesn't. They've been sitting in the classroom. They come to PE to move. Okay? So, very simple adaptation. We're going to do what we call walk the track. So, everybody stand up, stand up. We're going to walk around the perimeter of the field or the area, the court, while I'm explaining what we're going to do today. And we're going to make even things like distributing the balls, collecting the balls, getting set up. We're going to make those fun, and we're going to make them active. And so that's what we're teaching is techniques, okay? We are not trying to, reform them as educators in one 6-hour session. We're not trying to condescend or minimize what they're already doing. We're trying to lift up right? They know the children, they know the teachers, they know the community, We're trying to lift them up with some new ideas and some new skills and techniques so that they can provide a higher quality physical education program. And to inspire them with, this is how it is going to help the children, because they're teachers, because they love children. They want to help. We just need to give them, some additional ideas that are relevant.
Sure. How would you know that then there was impact, like what you said, Moses? How would you know that at the end of this period, and I guess for both of you, how would you know that this has worked? That the initial seeds that you've sown then actually have begun to reap something. What would you be looking for to say, okay, what would the trace be? If it turns green, we've succeeded.
Yes.
What?
yeah, that's a great question. And we feel that the most objective measure of that is the SOFIT. The SOFIT test. And part of the reason it's the SOFIT is so helpful is because it's entirely observational. It's not a survey. We're not we're not relying on people saying, "Oh yes, we did better," right? We're actually going and measuring quantitatively, is it more vigorous and is it more inclusive? And so we can do that. We usually do that, like I said, after about a month. We could do that several times if we want to get, multiple time periods. Another thing that we do, and what we've been doing this week actually, is training trainers and observers who can go into the schools and provide coaching, right? And so they can look at, how effective are we being in those teaching cues? How are we doing on the classroom management techniques? Are we giving clear signals? And so, for example, if you're teaching an activity and you explain the activity and you say, let's go, and most of the children are not getting it, they don't understand where they're supposed to go, or it's not going well, you stop and reframe it and explain it. However, if you explain it and most of the children are doing it, but there's a couple that don't get it, you don't stop the whole class for a couple that don't seem to, you redirect a couple of children rather than saying everybody stop. So there's little things like that they may not have been taught in school as techniques, right? Or the other thing is they may have gone to school a long time ago. Physical activity, like everything, is constantly evolving. And so it's very, very important, hopefully over time, the schools commit to, a regular program. We actually, really recommend that the teachers have this type of refresher training at least every 2 to 3 years, which is not a big investment, 6 hours every 3 years for physical activity with all the benefits of it and all the importance. It's entirely, that's entirely possible and desirable.
You mentioned that this program is, over 35 years?
Correct.
And it's scientific. What scientific processes have you used to come up with what you would say works?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. So one of the things that has been very, very important is the use of behavioral theory. Okay, so I'll give a couple examples. I hope I won't bore your listeners too much with lingo. One of the main theories that we use is social cognitive theory. And the basic principle behind social cognitive theory is that children, all of us really, learn by observation. Okay? This is role modeling. Okay? So if we want to change a behavior, because we're really talking about, changing the behavior of teachers and ultimately changing the behavior of students. If we want to change a behavior, we have to model it. We can't just say it, right? And we all know this as parents, as teachers, etc. You can't just say it. You have to show it. You have to do it. So social cognitive theory is, a very important basis. And another principle of social cognitive theory is, and this is, I think, one of the things that really makes Catch different from a lot of health education programs is knowledge is important, but a small part of the equation. Okay, so. Do we all know that physical activity is good? Do we all know that eating fruits and vegetables is good? Yes. Do we all know that avoiding alcohol and tobacco is good? Yes, we all know that. It's pretty easy to teach the knowledge. Does that knowledge translate to behavior?
Not necessarily.
Exactly. So what we have to think about, when we think about math education, we're talking about facts and knowledge. When we think about history education, we're talking about facts and knowledge. When we think about health education, we have to go beyond knowledge to behavior.
So we're saying that with math and science, for example, if you apply a formula,
A squared plus B squared is C squared.
You know that if you apply the formula, you will get the answer. You're guaranteed.
Correct.
But we're saying in this case, this is the formula. Until we actually play it out, and because we're dealing with human beings and seeing somebody's coming from a whole history of experiences, somebody feels a certain type of way on a certain day, that even if you apply said formula, you might have to tweak it a little bit for it to work. And we're saying that by nature of human beings, then those who are in an instructive position have to then be able to see what's going on with individuals in the group and then tweak things.
And to think more in
match.
terms of the group than the individual, because a math can be learned by an individual. Health is a social behavior, right? So we can provide the knowledge to every individual in the group, but then we have to have group structures, right? Information environment. We have to have a social environment. We have to have positive reinforcement. So for example, if you know that eating certain types of food is healthy, right, but you go into the head teacher's office and there's a big bowl of candy, what message is that sending the children?
Candy's good.
Okay, we have to have a nice bowl of apples, right? And show children, oh, apples are delicious. We're not giving you candy as a treat. We're giving you apples as a treat. So what we've done with social cognitive theory is to really help not just look at the unit of measure is not the child, right? The unit of measure is really the school, okay, and by extension the community, and you're trying to create a positive environment. The other big health behavior theory principle that we use, and I alluded to it earlier, is called diffusion of innovations. And that's the process by which we can't just tell everybody about it at once, okay? We have to find the approximately 1/6 of the population that is thought leaders, you know, the kind of people who come on this show, right? You have to find people who are thinking ahead and who inspire others. Now, when we go into a school, how do we find the thought leaders? Is it the person with the biggest title? Not necessarily. Is it the oldest person? Not necessarily. We have to look and see whose words are listened to, right? Who inspires other people? Who is willing to be the trier of ideas first? And so you can ask that question, say, who do you get your ideas from? You know, and we have to remember, some people are thought leaders when it comes to books. Some people are thought leaders when it comes to music. Some people are thought leaders when it comes to fashion.
And delinquents.
That's right. So we need to find the thought leaders of ideas and say, okay, and this is what we do when we recruit the first group of schools. Who's willing to go first? Volunteers only. We are not going to try to convince anybody. If you don't see the benefit of it and you want to see the results, great. We'll come back to you next year when we have the results. Now we're going with thought leaders.
Okay.
Let me ask this question. When you say the principals sign off on it, what are they signing off on? You've explained a bit of it, but is there a cost element to it?
Yes, that's a great question. Moses, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, for the pilot, it is fully funded by Catch Global Foundation. There's no cost element in it. And when it comes to public schools, the plan is that we are working with the organizations that will support us to roll out the program in public schools. For private schools, we are working with the Kenya Private School Association to see how well we can be able to come up with a cost for us to train the teachers, because we shall be going around the country and there's a cost associated with it. So we are still working with the Kenya Private School Association to come up with it, and soon we shall be coming up with a figure after the pilot and after the software, when we shall be, after doing the presentation, to show how it was and how it works, for us to demonstrate everything. So when it comes to, again, to public schools, we are working with them. We have a program called Adopt a School. Adopt a School is we're reaching out to organizations, like many organizations that might want to support prevention and management of non-communicable diseases, to promote catch and ensure that catch is implemented in these schools. We are also looking at even old boys and old girls of different schools who can be able to support the learners who are in the schools that they were in, to ensure that we have catch in the school. So that is how we're looking at it.
So you're saying for public schools, there really is no money attached to them signing up?
There is no money attached to it, yes.
Okay, but for private schools, you're still working on modalities of how to come up with a figure.
Yes.
Now, Ndu had asked a question, and I'd like to ask it again. How will you then know that you have been successful? What will you see? What will happen when the thing that you look at with the schools who've signed up, through the pilot, how will you then know that this program has been successful in this school?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and here's how I would answer it. There are two kinds of data. There are numbers and there are stories. And so a successful pilot will have both. We're working on measuring the numbers before and after, okay? And then we ask for stories. So we will go to the schools. Ultimately, the question is not whether we think it's working. The question is whether the schools think it's working. So we ask the schools, how is it going? Do the teachers like it? Do the kids like it? And there's a very strong, as I mentioned, health is a social behavior. So if the school believes, yes, these new activities, these ideas, these techniques are having an impact, then there you go. And we hear stories all the time about, kids who were used to, sit on their own during physical activity time, and now they have found a game that they like. We always used to play basketball. This kids didn't like basketball. Now we've had some new games, and the kids are getting engaged.
So that's how you're going to measure it.
Data, numbers, and stories.
Thank you very much. Duncan Van Dusen, founder and CEO of Catch Global Foundation, and Moses Oluchiri, founder and executive director of Wellness for Greatness Kenya, our guests this morning.